Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar of the European Fire Safety Week 2023 about fire safety and subsidiarity, what role for the EU. I'm Quentin Dulst, I'm Director for Green and Field Building at the European Copper Institute. European Copper Institute is coordinating the FEEDS, the Forum for European Electrical Domestic Safety, and also a supporter of the European Fire Safety Alliance and the European Fire Safety Week. And today this webinar is co-organized by three organizations: Fire Safe Europe, European Fire Safety Alliance, and FEEDS. And we have representatives of all these organizations as well in the panel. So I will introduce them in one moment. The aim of today is to discuss and try to answer the question, fire safety and subsidiarity, what role for the EU? So subsidiarity is something that is often coming into discussions at EU level to discuss whether or not the EU should do something. And what we would like is to dive a bit more into it to understand what the EU treaties say or don't say about this, and what is the impact of this question about the possibilities for the EU to act. So for this, we have a panel of participants today. First, we will have a presentation by Eugenio Quintieri, who is Managing Director of Fire Safe Europe. Maybe, I just suggest we can remove the slide and have all the speakers showing up with their video while I introduce you. So first, we will have Eugenio Quintieri, Managing Director of Fire Safe Europe, a European association representing companies and professional organizations aiming to improve fire safety of buildings. Eugenio has more than 10 years of experience in European affairs since 2017, also as a leader of EU associations in the construction sector. So welcome, Eugenio. Then we have Christoph Biskup from the European Fire Safety Alliance. So the European Fire Safety Alliance is an independent alliance of fire professionals whose mission is to reduce the risks from fire, especially in the domestic area. So it is led by a group of influencers on fire safety and fire safety science, mainly with a fire brigade background. And Christoph, in particular, who is the chair of the alliance since 2021, he has served as a career firefighter in Poland. He has a master's degree in fire protection engineering. And with all the things that he has done and with leading role in Poland, he touched on training of emergency services, research, product certification, and also on the topic of community fire safety. So a long experience in the fire services and now a strong network with the European Fire Safety Alliance on this. So welcome, Christoph. Then we have Teresa Griffin, the chair of the Forum for European Electrical Domestic Safety, the FEEDS, who brings together different organizations aiming to improve electrical safety in dwellings in Europe. And so Teresa acts as chair of this forum. And before that, she has been a member of the European Parliament between 2014 and 2020 from the UK. And unfortunately, with Brexit, she had to stop her role. She had also been elected as Energy MEP of the Year in 2017 for her work on energy poverty. That's a topic that she had helped to advance a lot at EU level, even if maybe not directly a EU competence as well. So that will be interesting in the discussion. And last but not least, we welcome also Antonio Estela de Noriega, who is a jurist and professor of administrative law at the Universidad Carlos III de Madrid. He is really an expert in the topic of subsidiarity. So with a master in European Community Law from the Free University of Brussels and a PhD from the European University Institute. And he made his PhD thesis on the principle of subsidiarity. He has done also several publications that are well recognized on the topic. So he will definitely help us to better address the topics today. So we have a very interesting panel. I'm looking forward to the discussion. I also invite all the attendees to share questions via the Q&A function, as I explained before. And now we will first start with a presentation by Eugenio, who looked at the question of fire safety, why it's important, and what is said within the treaties to look what would justify action from the EU on fire safety. So Eugenio, I give you the floor for your presentation, and then we will come back with all panelists for a discussion around this. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Quentin, for the presentation. It's a pleasure to be here today and also to organize the events with you. The idea is to set a bit the scene to understand what there is in the, let's say, what is the role of the EU when it comes to fire safety. I think the first thing that is important to do is to have a look at what is going on at the European Union level and what is the status quo. So, according to cautious estimates, because it's always difficult to have an exact number because of the lack of data that we have at the European Union level, we have more or less 5,000 fire-related casualties in domestic buildings. There are still a lot of unmitigated fire risks, like obsolete electrical installations. According to FIDS, 50% of the accidents in residential buildings have an electrical source. Smoke alarms are not everywhere, as they should be, with only 2/3 of the member states require their installation in homes. A lot of European citizens live in substandard housing, and this, of course, increases the risk of fires in those houses. And we also know why, because there is a very little renovation rate in Europe, and it should be much higher according to many researchers. And then also the content of the building can be an advertent risk, limiting the escape time in the event of fire, depending on the flammability, of course, and is involved in 25% of fatal fires. We also have a lot of new challenges that also need to be considered when talking about fire safety at the European Union level. First of all, we of course support all the decarbonization solutions that are pushed by EU policies to improve energy efficiency, like PV panels, EV recharging points, heat pumps. But the thing is also that they introduce new ignition risks due to the increased electrical loads, but also because of the obsolete electrical installation and the low maintenance of those. We also have new building materials and new construction methods, with the idea of always to increase energy efficiency and sustainability, but they also have an impact on fire dynamics. Another important challenge for Europe is its aging demographic, and this is, of course, increases the vulnerability of people in buildings, and the same applies to people that are affected by energy poverty, unfit housing, or disabilities that are more vulnerable to fires. Climate change also plays a role because it makes the fire safety challenge more unpredictable. We have drier conditions, mainly during the summer season, and this means that the environment is more fire prone. We see it with increase of forest fires in Europe, but also we have a lot of unforeseen weather patterns that, of course, have an effect on evacuation and firefighting operations. We also believe that fire safety is an integral part of sustainability because we can find it in the 3 pillars of sustainability: environmental, because of the pollution and the carbon emissions that are created by fires; the social pillar, because of the health risk and the community disruption that fires create; and the economic pillar, because, of course, of the recovery costs that are linked to rebuilding after fires occur in buildings. But then the question is, who is responsible to address this unmitigated risk and these new challenges? So when we look at the treaties, at European Union treaties, we see that there are articles that are linked to the competence of the EU. Mainly, they are in the Treaty of the Functioning on the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union. We have exclusive competence for the EU, competence in which only the European Union can act. There are shared competences between the EU and the member states, meaning that the member states can act only if the EU has chosen not to. And then the EU has competence to support, coordinate, or supplement the actions of member states in other areas, meaning that in this case, the EU cannot really have legally binding acts that then will require harmonization and approximation of laws and regulations in the member states. So, can we find fire safety in those areas of competence clearly, directly? No, the answer is no. So the question is, where can we find fire safety? These are more or less the main competence of the EU under these three categories. And mainly we think that the link that fire safety is in different shared components of the EU, and also in some that are related to the supporting, coordinating, and supplementing areas of competence of the European Union. I will not, this is just an overview, and then we will now go domain by domain to understand what is the link with fire safety and to understand also the competence of the EU in those fields. So when it comes to the internal market, the free movement of goods is one of the four fundamental freedoms of the EU. And the idea is to have an integration of national markets, the establishment of an internal market in which products can be traded freely. And there is also a legal basis for the EU to harmonize directives and regulations concerning products. So with a reference, of course, in our case, to product safety. What is the link with fire safety? So the products, including those that are related to fire safety, are traded freely within the EU, the free movement of goods. This means that standards need to be harmonized across the EU to ensure that the products meet the safety expectation of other member states. An example, and the main example that we have on this, is the construction products regulation that directly impacts fire safety by setting harmonized rules for the marketing of construction products in the EU. And under the CPR, the construction products, also the ones that are linked to fire safety, like fire alarms, fire-resistant materials, and other fire safety equipment, need to meet the declared performance characteristic in order to be CE marked and traded within the EU. Social policy. There are different elements that are related to social policy, but in our case, the most important part is the one related to the health and safety at work. In this field, the Commission, the EU, can support and complement the activities of the member states, encourage cooperation and facilitate the consultation of worker and employers on matters of social policy, and stimulate and promote cooperation between the member states. What is the link with fire safety? Of course, it's the safety and the health of all workers in buildings. That means also protection against fire hazards, but there is also, of course, a link to the health and safety of firefighters during their professional duties. Here you have different examples of European legislation that is related to the health and safety of workers, the Workplace Safety Directive, the Framework Directive. Maybe also very relevant is the EU Safety, Health and Science Directive that requires employers to provide clear and understandable safety and health signs in the workplace. That means also fire safety signs like cover signs for fighting equipment, emergency exit warnings of fire-related hazards. Public health. So there's also a supporting competence, and in this case, the European Union should complement national policies to ensure a high level of human health protection, meaning preventing physical and mental illness and diseases, and obviating sources of danger to physical and mental health. In this case, of course, the link with fire safety is direct, and all the safety-related legislation contributes to this goal. Consumer protection, also very important, because the European Union should contribute to protecting the health, safety, and economic interests of consumers. And this means safeguarding consumers from hazards and to ensure that high safety standards for product systems and services across the European Union are respected. And of course, fire safety is an element of this, as consumers need to be protected from the risk of fire in the products they purchase and use. The most known example is the Toy Safety Directive that ensures that toys which include flammability standards meet safety requirements to protect children from hazards, including fire. Environment, and this the EU has shared competence, mainly to ensure environmental protection, improve public health and prudent use of natural resources, And as we already discussed earlier, the fires in buildings affect the environment by emitting smoke and harmful gases, and the chemicals and waters used to extinguish fires can pollute the surrounding areas. But there's also a link to circular economy and to the circular economy goals of the European Union, because of course, when a building burns, you cannot reuse, recycle the products, and of course, this means having less resource efficiency. An example of EU legislation in this case, the eco-design directives with mandatory ecological requirements for products, and of course with a direct link to safety. Civil protection, in this case, the European Union can encourage the cooperation between the member states to improve the effectiveness of systems for preventing and protecting against natural or man-made disasters. Fire safety is an element of civil protection in most of European countries, and it's integral to the concept of reducing and managing disasters. The example that we can find in European legislation is the European Civil Protection Mechanism. This is established to foster cooperation among the different national civil protection authorities, and when it comes to fire, it can be activated to respond to severe fires like forest fires, and we have seen it during the summer. And they are also important for fire safety of buildings because forest fires can also threaten residential areas. Energy, very important topic, and became even more important with the sustainability goals in the Green Deal of the European Union. The area and the legal basis is Article 194, with the idea of improving energy efficiency, ensuring the functioning of the energy market, promoting energy saving and the development of newer and renewable sources of energy, and promoting the interconnection of energy networks. So the thing is that in order to deploy those solutions, we need to make sure that these are fire safe. Otherwise, fire hazard may become a major obstacle to that deployment. And you can also understand that if we will have a lot of fires concerning those decarbonization solutions, this will lead to tragic accidents and concern a resistance to the deployment of the solutions. We already have some examples that are related to this. You can think about the fires related to EV recharging points. This led, for example, in Belgium to different bans from facility managers on having EV recharging points and EVs in general into the parkings, and that's why we need to do more. We are doing something already with the Commission Task Force that will issue guidelines for covered parking areas, but of course, more can be done. An example of EU legislation in this field is the Energy Performance of Building Directives that is now under the revision, and we will be probably approved soon. And we hope, of course, to see more reference to fire safety. But already in the current text, there are different references, and the major one is the requirement for member states to promote the use of high-efficiency alternative system in buildings undergoing major renovation, while ensuring that fire safety risks are into consideration. Tourism. In this area, the European Union can take actions to promote the competitiveness of tourism businesses, but also another important point relates to the free movement of people, providing the right for every citizen of the EU to move, reside freely within the territory of the member states. For us here, the link is quite clear, because we think that every person, whether they are residents, tourists, or Erasmus students, deserves and expects a consistent level of protection and safety wherever they move, wherever they are within the EU borders. An example of EU legislation in this sense is Council recommendation from 86 on fire safety in existing hotels. Of course, it's not unusual regulation or directive of the EU. It's a Council recommendation, but still very important, that seeks to define a minimum fire safety level for hotels in European countries, that recommends EU countries to take a series of actions to ensure that hotels meet the standards. It's also important to make reference to the European Court of Justice that has the ultimate authority to interpret European treaties to decide on the scope and the nature of the competence of the EU. Unluckily, we do not have any specific reference on the fire safety competences of the EU or of the member states in the field of fire safety. Last but not least, the relation with the building codes. So building codes are set by the member states to outline the minimum requirements for the construction, design, and maintenance of buildings to ensure the health, safety, and welfare of the occupants and the public. There are different elements that are covered, and one of this is fire safety. The competence for building codes lies with the member states of the European Union. They are responsible to set the building regulation and standards according to the needs, the challenge, and existing infrastructure. Of course, this is important because every building is different, and buildings also differ a lot from one country to another. But the truth is that the European Union has an influence in certain areas of the building codes in a direct or an indirect way. You can think about the directives and regulations in the field of energy efficiency or in the field of sustainability that then have an impact on the building codes at the national level. So to conclude and to answer to the initial question, who is responsible for the fire safety of people in buildings? So the issue of competence on fire safety doesn't seem to derive directly from the European treaties or the jurisprudence. It's clear that the principle of subsidiarity should be respected. Member states should remain free to design their fire safety regulations by considering the local specificities in terms of building design solutions, materials, use patterns, and climate. But we think that the European Union can support member states, and this is possible politically and legally, by having a coordinating role on fire safety to realize the EU objectives in different fields of the EU, like tourism, internal market, energy, environment, human health, and consumer protection. This doesn't mean taking away the competence of the member states, but on the contrary, supporting and complementing member states when needed, and producing an added value for the member states when the action can be carried out at the European Union level. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eugenio, for this very comprehensive presentation. So now I will ask all panelists to come back on the screen for the discussion. So there was a lot of information into the presentation of Eugenio. I remind to everyone that this will be available afterwards. You will all receive it, and that if you have questions, you can also put it into the Q&A function. But I will start with my questions now to the panelists. So first, Antonio, as a jurist and professor of administrative law, could you explain in a few simple words the principle of subsidiarity?
Okay, thank you very much for your kind invitation, for having me today here with you, speaking about subsidiarity, which is a dear topic for me, because as Quentin said, it was the topic of my PhD a long time ago in the Florence Institute, European University Institute. A PhD that I did with the current president of the European University Institute, Renaud Deus. So I'm very happy to get back to my young years. You know, it rejuvenates me in a way to speak about subsidiarity once again. So thank you very much for your kind invitation. Let me start by reading Article 5.3 of the European Union Treaty, which is the article in which the principle of subsidiarity is inserted. It says, under the principle of subsidiarity, in areas which do not fall within its exclusive competence, the Union shall act only if and insofar as the objectives of the proposed action cannot be sufficiently achieved by the member states, either at central level or at regional and local level, but can rather be, by reason of the scale or effects of the proposed action, be better achieved at Union level. The institutions of the Union shall apply the principle of subsidiarity as laid down in the Protocol on the application of the principles of subsidiarity and proportionality. National parliaments ensure compliance with the principle of subsidiarity in accordance with the procedure set out in that protocol. So there are at least three main ideas that stem from the reading and interpretation that has been given to this really very important article of the European Union Treaty. The first idea is that subsidiarity is conceived by this article as a break and not as a way to promote European Union action. The negative overtones of Article 5.3 are totally clear. So therefore, a first idea would be that the principle of subsidiarity is not neutral. Is more, it has rather a negative dimension in the sense that it is used more to stop than to foster European Union action. If one takes into consideration why subsidiarity, let's make let's remember a little bit the history behind the introduction of subsidiarity into the treaties. This makes sense. This negative interpretation of the principle makes sense. Basically, what happens is that in the European Economic Community Treaty, the member states adopted under the European Economic Community Treaty decisions by unanimity. This, as we know, changed with the Single European Act. The Single European Act implied a shift from unanimity to majority voting. And when the Maastricht Treaty was being drafted, there was an uproar for the defense of national sovereignty derived from the fact that many decisions had been taken in the previous period by majority voting. So the member states such as, for example, the UK, but also the German Länder, reacted before this development. They use a number of mechanisms in order to try to stop the European Union's intervention. And one of these mechanisms, of course, there was a debate about getting back to unanimity in crucial areas that didn't fly because at the time there were already 12 and still growing member states in the Union. But one of the ideas was precisely to introduce the subsidiarity principle into the treaties. This idea was successful. It was introduced in all Article 3b, if I remember well, of the Maastricht Treaty, which has now become Article 5.3 of the European Union Treaty. So the background, the reason why subsidiarity was introduced into the treaties explains well why we should give to the principle a negative interpretation. The principle is used more as a break, as I said, than as a way to foster European Union's intervention. The second idea is that the principle includes two tests. One is the so-called necessity test. So the European Union has to prove the necessity of the new European Union's action or intervention in a new area of public intervention. And the second one is the so-called added value test. So therefore, the Union is not only to prove that the action is necessary, but also that the action gives an added value to what the member states could do or have done unilaterally. Okay, and that is the second test is an important test. You have to show that the European Union action would, in a way, complement or supplement what the member states can do, are able to do on their own. So it's not just that the European Union would just coordinate the 27 member states in doing something else. It's not only that. The European Union, and in particular the European Commission, which is, as we know, the proposer of all community legislation, has really to prove the added value of the proposed European Union's legislation. That is an important point. So the third point would be the bottom line, the summary. The summary would be that when the European Union institutions can prove that the potential European Union action is necessary and that it has a certain added value compared to what the member states of the Union could do or are doing, then subsidiarity ceases to be an obstacle for community intervention, for European Union intervention. Of course, you can say, well, we can turn it back, the principle, and use it as well as a way to justify European Union's action. And this is coherent. This makes sense. Because if you are showing that the European Union's action is necessary and that the European Union's action has a certain added value, you are, in a way, giving reasons of why the European Union should act in a given area. Even though, so you understand my point, even though the principle had in its origins a clear negative overtone, the fact that you can comply with both tests converts the principle in a way to justify positively European Union's action. I think I should stop there because I said many things, and maybe there are questions or further reflections. Or...
No, I think it was very clear, and I will maybe summarize for everyone what I noted, and then you will correct me if I'm wrong. But so first of all, you said that it is a negative tone. It's often introduced more as a break to action, and that's also something that I've heard some members of the European Parliament stating, that if you want to block something in Europe, you use the principle of subsidiarity. But then there are two tests, two elements that are there. And that we can turn around to say, actually, that's just to justify action. And these are essential now for the discussion we have. First one is the necessity of action. The second is the added value of taking this action at EU level rather than leaving it to member state or regional level. So I think that's what we need to remember here. And so we will come back to it with the other panelists, but then maybe to you, Antonio, with this background and your knowledge and what you have heard from Eugenio in his presentation. What's your first reaction about his conclusion that some action at EU level would be justified?
Okay, my first reaction is that it is important to have in mind that subsidiarity is only applicable to the field of shared competences of the Union. So we wouldn't need to pass a subsidiarity test regarding the complementary or supplementary competences of the Union. That's an important point. There is a certain confusion here. In the presentation, I think that subsidiarity sticks to shared competences and not to exclusive competences or to complementary competences. That's the first point, which is important to have in mind. More in general, my overall reaction would be that I see grounds for a subsidiarity justification regarding the connection between fire safety and the internal market. So, and I think that's the main basis where one could ground a subsidiarity argument before the rest of the member states and the European Union institutions. Because above all, if you could show that fire safety it's a hindrance to the free circulation of products, but not only products, also services, because services are related to fire safety. There are, enterprises undertaking, providing this kind of services, for buildings, etc. So it's not only products, it's services as well. So if you could give evidence, ample evidence, that the internal market is being obstacled, the realization of the internal market is being obstacled by different fire safety regulations for products and services, I think that would be a very important starting point where to base future intervention by the European Union in this field. I'm talking about transversal action, not supplementary action, not complementary action, but a more general action in this field. But for doing that, you should be able to prove that this is an important hindrance. This amounts to an important hindrance to the free circulation of products and services in the European Union. Instead, I'm afraid, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, when you said that it does not apply to complementary competencies, what does it mean? Does it mean that the EU can take action on supporting measures, so in this complementary competence area, in any case, or does it mean that we cannot?
You do not have to comply a subsidiarity test regarding this third kind of European Union competences, because subsidiarity only applies to the field of shared competences.
But so these complementary competencies, you can then, even if fire safety is not described there, you could say we want to take support measures, coordination measures to supplement. There is nothing to block it.
There won't be a subsidiarity argument there. Yeah.
Okay.
As I will read it back. Article 5.3 says very, very clearly, under the principle of subsidiarity, in areas which do not fall within its exclusive competence. So it's the interpretation that has been given to this is that subsidiarity is applied to the field of shared competences of the Union. So there is one reason for that, for not applying subsidiarity to the field of supplementary competences, which is that harmonization is ruled out in this field. So therefore, no one would never raise a subsidiarity argument there, because there is no, the European Union cannot propose legislation whatsoever in that particular field of complementary and supplementary competences. That is the main reason why.
So it means that if we want to ask for actions to support, to coordinate action with member states that are actions that are not setting an harmonization of the rules, actually subsidiarity cannot be used as an argument to oppose this.
That's it. Yeah, that's the main point.
But the two tests are still something that we can take in mind to justify some action there. Because I think still in this area, if we can show it's necessary and it's at value, we can take action. But if we want to have an harmonization of rules, so more in the form of legislations, or then it comes into this shared competence, and then the subsidiarity test has to be applied.
That's it. Subsidiarity is more is above all a break against European Union's wide regulation or legislation in different areas. And here, once Article 5.3 excludes exclusive competences from the application of the subsidiarity principle, the other alternative is to apply to shared competences. As I said, when it comes to complementary or supplementary competences, harmonization is totally ruled out. The European Union cannot harmonize those areas, cannot legislate on those areas, can only set up programs, etc., that complement or supplement the member states' action. So I don't see how a subsidiarity argument could be raised regarding those areas. Instead, an important subsidiarity argument could be raised against the deployment of shared competences in the field of fire safety. There is where harmonization takes place, European Union legislation or regulation takes place, and there is where someone could raise an important subsidiarity objection. As I said, if you link it with free circulation of products, but also services, and you can show that there are important hindrances to the realization of the internal market, to the free circulation of products and services, connected to fire safety regulations, that would be a very important argument in favor of regulating this particular area. Just to finish, the other fields of competence that you mentioned, which are basically of a complementary or supplementary fields of competence, as I said before, I think the argument would not fly there. The link with what the European Union does, as the presentation showed, is very, very feeble. It's very weak. So in those areas, I think you have the best that you can get, which is, standards, guidelines, recommendations here and there, scattered in different pieces of legislation or of community intervention in general terms, and also what you can have is, for example, in the products directive, a specific reference to in the toys. I think it's a directive. I don't know if it's a directive or a regulation. A specific reference to fire safety, but beyond that, beyond this sectoral references, very specific references to subsidiarity, I think this is the best that you can get.
Yeah, okay, but so there is nothing blocking the EU to make guidelines. So in any case, subsidiarity cannot be used against it. So because that's often something we hear, oh, no, we should not work on fire safety because of subsidiarity. But actually, a lot can be done, if I understand you correctly. I will come back first to Christophe, because there are 2 points in what you highlighted that are important. These are the necessity and the added value. And so I would like to ask Christophe, because you have worked as a career firefighter in Poland for 30 years. So you see important fire safety challenges. And from your experience in Poland, why do you think that it is necessity to address them, and why there would be added value to address these challenges at EU level rather than leaving it to the member states?
So thank you very much, Quentin, for this question. And probably it would be slightly easier to answer your question from the perspective of my work for the European Fire Safety Alliance than from the perspective, but of course they are mixed from the perspective of being a firefighter in Poland. Yes, indeed, because in fact we identified the main fire safety problems and challenges for the European Union and for the whole European Union, of course, and they were described in the European Fire Safety Action Plan. And we quickly noticed that fire safety is impacted by and impacts many EU policies and initiatives. Of course, especially those related to energy transition and renovation wave, but of course not only. And Eugenio, in his presentation, he highlighted many of them. And but we have also noticed that fire safety is interlinked with several objectives of the EU. For example, it includes tackling energy poverty or protecting vulnerable consumers. And for example, we already know that fire safety and energy poverty are linked. We know that our poorest citizens live in the least energy efficient and the least fire safe housing. And in my opinion, EU institutions have both high potential, but also they have quite great interest to coordinate actions and support member states, because some challenges are common, and common challenges are usually better addressed via, in that case, EU-wide cooperation. And moreover, sometimes they must be addressed to ensure that EU objectives are safely achieved. And I'm also afraid that some member states might have not enough capacities to face individually with many serious challenges related to fire safety.
Thank you, Christophe. So the necessity is there, because if they are not addressed, then some EU objectives will not be achieved. And they are better addressed at EU level because stronger cooperation, putting resources together, so it can be, for example, in research, in data, these type of things would help. So that's your point of view, as I understand.
Yeah.
What we also had from Antonio, and I will ask Teresa, is that we see also that we have the hard law, so setting a directive or regulation to really harmonize rules and standards across the EU. So that's something that can be done. But there are also many other things that can be done than setting legislations. We spoke about guidelines, etc. So Teresa, in your view, what do you think the EU can do? What is the spectrum of action that are possible?
Thank you, Quentin. If I could just make a couple of comments before coming to the substance of your question. I have to say, Antonio and Eugenio, as an ex-MEP, that was one of the clearest explanations of subsidiarity I have ever had. And it was, obviously I'm here as FEEDS, delighted to chair the Forum for European Electrical Domestic Safety, which is FEEDS, but I also bring my experience as an MEP, and I can tell you, it didn't really happen in the Parliament, but it happened with the Commission and the Council, that people tried to stop us doing things, quoting subsidiarity. It happened on a pretty regular basis, and we as the Parliament kind of had to fight back against that. And just one legislative thing until I go into the non-legislative examples. After the tragedy of the Grenfell fire in London in 2017, I went to the rapporteur for the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, and I said to her, whenever we say energy efficiency, can we also say fire safety and write it into the legislation, which is what we did. It's still in the recast. I'm a bit worried that it needs to be more strongly in the recast, but we're working on that. And I don't know, oh, and you know, as for Brexit, Antonio, bringing back sovereignty to the UK, it's been an absolute disaster, I have to say. And as you know, you may have heard that David Cameron, who instigated Brexit, actually was made Foreign Secretary of the UK today. Hello, friends and neighbours right across Europe. What sort of message does that send out in terms of cooperation, collaboration, etc.? And very sadly, there were 5 deaths in a house fire in London last night, and there's still a person missing. Now, we don't yet know the cause because it's under investigation, but you know, to lose 5 people in one house fire, we collectively have to keep EU fire safe. And I would argue very strongly that it is an obligation, certainly of the Parliament, and I'll come to the Commission, to actually do everything that it can in all relevant legislation and also policy and platforms to keep citizens fire safe. And as Antonio said, and Christophe, you know, our poorest live in the leakiest and least fire safe housing, often in social housing or maybe with private landlords. We have an obligation to keep those people fire safe, but there's a lot of non-legislative possibilities. As you know, I co-wrote with colleagues the Energy Poverty Manifesto for the Parliament that was then adopted by the Parliament and all key political parties. But what has come out of that is the establishment first of an observatory, then of the Energy Poverty Advisory Hub. And the whole thing is we need a place where we can have quality research where we can actually collect data. And I've always argued that it's one of the responsibilities of the European Commission to exchange best practice. If we're doing it well in Manchester, Liverpool should know about it. If we're doing it well in Bologna, Rome should know about it. You know, Budapest, etc., etc., etc. There should be a gold standard. So I think platforms to exchange best practice, and as Christoph said in his contribution, some member states don't have the capacity. So if any, you know, if another member state has already developed this work, why not share it, but also advocate it? One of the things that we did, Antonio, when I was in the European Parliament, is that in any trade deal, we wrote in gender equality. Why not? Why not be asking the trade deal to actually have gender equality? So there's all sorts of kind of parallel actions that we can take, and kind of cross-cutting horizontal actions that I believe we should be doing as Europe. And I can say Europe is part of these, although thank God I'm an Irish citizen, so I still have my European passport. Hooray. Also, you know, we can assess the impact of existing and developing European policy. So, you know, we can look at it through the prism of, you know, what does this mean for fire safety? And as Eugenio said, there's a lot of areas. So a coordinating role on fire safety related to its shared and support, competencies in the field of tourism, internal market, energy, environment, human health, and consumer protection. There's all sorts of work that we could be doing, and we can define research and opportunities at an EU level, rather than leaving, as Christoph said, every member state on its own. And not addressing these challenges potentially hinders the efficacy and the opportunities of the energy transition. So I think there's a whole host of opportunities, Quentin. It's about addressing them.
Thank you, Teresa. So indeed, a lot that can be done, and maybe Antonio, to come back to what you said before. So this type of non-legislative thing directly. So setting up a platform where you will have experts from member states that are working on fire safety, and that will assess the impact of other legislations on fire safety, and then define needs for research, need for work, need for guidelines, etc. This is something to which the subsidiarity principle cannot be opposed, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, don't misinterpret me. The Article 5.3 says that the area in which the subsidiarity principle is not applicable is the area of exclusive competences. So therefore, in the rest of the competences, the subsidiarity principle applies. But the main debate regarding subsidiarity has been in connection with the legislative or regulatory action of the European Union. This is where the problem is. For example, if you wanted to propose to the European Commission a big budgetary program for refurbishing the redoing the 50% of the buildings in Europe, so that they would comply with certain fire safety standards, and that budget was an important one, then a subsidiarity argument could be raised. But when one thinks about subsidiarity, is thinking above all in the regulatory or legislative intervention of the European Union, and not in supplementary or complementary actions, because they are by definition not so invasive of member state sovereignty. They are guidelines, standards, recommendations, soft law, as we say in our legal jargon, that member states can escape from. There is not where the problem lies. The problem is with European regulation, European legislation, and this is the ground where a debate on subsidiarity can be raised.
Okay, thank you, Antonio. It links to one question that we got from the audience. So could the EU request a body to issue some technical guidance document on various fire safety topics, which could then be incorporated into national regulations. This would not impact subsidiarity. So is it indeed something that the EU could do?
I mean, this is not a yes or not. I mean, in what area in particular? I mean, what would depend on what standards are we talking about? But in theory, if you could justify, I mean, the requirements of the subsidiarity principle, taking into account that we are talking about soft law, are less important.
So for this area, basically, if we can justify a real need, because we see, okay, this guidance are missing, member states do not really know how to deal with, for example, the consequence of deploying e-mobility, or to deal with the fire safety of this. So, and they would say, okay, we need some guidance, and then the commission say, okay, we request a body, or we group some people together to develop some guidance that can then be used by the member states. This would be feasible. We come back again probably to the need to demonstrate that there is a need and an added value.
Yes, I mean, to be on the safe side, you would have to do it. Okay, yeah. I would even say that you would have to do it even regarding European Union's exclusive competences. But anyway, okay, to be on the safe side. Yeah. But no one is going to raise a big obstacle regarding guidelines or standards, which are by definition non-legally binding on the member states. Okay. This is not the battleground. The battleground would be if you wanted to propose something else, something more important, a harmonization measure, be it partial. Even if it's partial, then a subsidiarity argument is going to be raised.
Yeah. Okay. That's already really interesting.
By definition.
Yeah. Because I think a lot of what the sector or the experts are calling for is actually really this, like Teresa says, this platform to discuss, assess things, think about guidelines, gather the data, the knowledge. So a lot of these soft laws that should not be opposed with subsidiarity, but of course there is still the need to demonstrate the need and the added value. So that's something important. I would like to come back to some of the elements highlighted by Eugenio, and the first one is the free movement of people. So that's maybe one area where we would move more in the idea of setting really regulation there to harmonize. So Eugenio highlighted every person, whether a resident, a tourist, or an Erasmus student, and actually traveling freely around Europe, would expect to have a consistent level of protection and safety wherever you are within the border of the EU. So this could justify to make sure that you have some essential fire safety requirements in every building, that the approach is similar, that you know what to do in case there is a fire alarm, or just to have a similar fire alarm in every building. So this type of thing, so that it's the same whether you are in your home country or traveling in another EU country, that fire safety is approached in a similar way. And for the free movement of people, that could be a justification. So that was the message of Eugenio. So Antonio, in your view, would this be a justification to take some EU action on fire safety and to define some minimum rules?
I'm sorry to disagree a little bit here, but not really. I don't think this argument would fly. The reason why is that not. I mean, here in this circuit in which we are right now, this could sound unbelievable, but in general terms, not so many people travel in the European Union. For example, I took some data from Eurostat. These data are from, if I'm not wrong, from 2017. In 2017, 225 million people, European Union residents moved. But of this number sounds big, but 75%, 2/3 of these people only move domestically. Okay, the rest, 25%, which would be 5.5% only, travel abroad. That abroad does not mean only European Union member states, but other third countries.
But do you speak here about moving or about also business travel or touristic travel?
I'm talking about tourism, because if we take a look at the numbers regarding people who change of residence inside the European Union, the numbers are much less. So even if we took it from the most positive outlook here, which would be, or dimension here, which would be tourism. We are talking about people who just move for one day or something like that. The number is not big. These are the kind of considerations that are going to be taken into account in a subsidiarity test. What are we talking about? What is the scale and the dimension of this phenomenon? And here, the scale and the dimension is not big. I understand your concern. I understand that that people's movement, is in the head of everyone, and that is a recurrent argument for almost everything right now, the European Union level. But in this particular field, I wouldn't say it would fly. As I said before, I would connect it more with product and services free circulation.
Okay, Eugenio or Christophe, Teresa, would you like to add some thoughts on this element of free movement and yeah, the interesting feedback from Antonio that maybe the scale is not big enough, even if in our bubble we may perceive it's bigger.
I think there's a comment as well from Alan from the Fire Sprinklers Network in the Q&A or the chat. I'm not sure. He had a slightly different stat. You know me, Quentin, I'm for the art of the possible. And I would like to think that we, again, have a duty for achieving where we can decent standards when people travel. Coming back to the product, not one of us who've got a child or a nephew or a niece would dream now of buying a toy that didn't have the CE mark. So, there is precedence here.
Yeah, and indeed, I see Alan in the chat said that according to Eurostat, half of hotel nights are taken by people who do not live in country where the hotel is located. So it probably depends on which way you look at the statistics. So if you just look at hotel nights, actually it impacts mainly, or at least for half of them, travelers. If we look at how many people do travel, we may come to the conclusion like Antonio. So it's also a question on which numbers you are looking at. Eugenio, you wanted to react?
I think from a legal point of view, I think what Antonio says is really valid, because then when we need to look at this from that perspective, I think we need to consider all these elements and whether then you can really pass the test or not. And I think Antonio's point is very relevant, because then when you do this exercise, you need to look at the numbers. I think what's something to put us on the balance is what is at stake. And even though maybe the number will not be that high, at the end of the day, what's at stake, it's people's life. So I think it's an element that you need to put on the balance of that weight that you are creating in a way. And maybe just to make some examples on what could be done, and even if it's considered hard law, but there for me the necessity, the added value, and also the cost will, the necessity will be high, the added value will be high, and the cost will be very low. If you take some essential fire safety requirements, like having obligatory smoke alarms, or having obligatory electrical inspections, having a good fire safety compartmentations, like normal concepts. The necessity is there because we know the situation of fires in Europe and how they are created and how they develop and propagate. The added value is there because we will say that there is no added value on having already smoke alarms everywhere. We are not telling the member states to say you need to have this type of fire safety compartmentation, this type of inspection. We're simply saying that the concept is something that you should do. And here I'm talking about hard law. And I think these are no-brainers. And I think this is something that is clear that we should have at European Union level, as we expect safety wherever we go, and even if not everybody is traveling, the ones who travel expect, not to die, not to die with a fire. And I think the way there is to also be balanced with what is at stake, that it's life.
Yeah, thank you, Eugenio, for this good point. So there are some good thoughts on this point of free movement, where indeed we need to see about the scale and dimension of the issue, but also, yeah, what is needed and what is at stake at the end. A second topic is the energy transition. Antonio still wanted to say something on this topic.
So, I'm saying all this. I'm using all this data in order to try to argue in favor or against European Union intervention, because the European Court of Justice has turned the subsidiarity principle into a kind of giving reasons requirement, even though the European Court of Justice has not implemented very severely, in a very hard way, the subsidiarity principle, as we all know. I mean, it does a very superficial check of subsidiarity because it shows deference to the European Union's legislator. In some Philip Morris, for example, case, it has said that it will look at the reasons why the European Union institutions are proposing a given action. What reasons are these? These are the sort of reasons that the European Court of Justice is going to check. What are we talking about here? How can you show in objective terms that there is a scale and a dimension that is relevant for the Union and not only for the member states? Even though, as I said, please understand me well, the European Court of Justice is not implementing a hard check, a hard look on subsidiarity, but it has said also that it will turn down measures that are clearly do not fall clearly within the objectives and competences and areas of intervention of the Union. This is why the giving reasons requirement, the need to give flash numbers, data, evidence of the proposed action is so much important in this area.
Thank you. And about data, actually, a key first action that we need from the EU is to have better data collection on fire safety at EU level. And on this, there are some good developments, actually, because there was a pilot project financed by the Parliament on this to develop a method. And very recently, the Parliament has agreed to finance a follow-up action, so a preparatory action to test the implementation of this method by member states. So that's also a way of action from the Parliament for things that do not fall directly into EU competence, and then the Parliament can still propose to do something. So on this, we have made good progress, and it will bring data that will probably also help to look at the need for action. I wanted to move to a second topic that was raised by Eugenio, and for which there were also some questions and comments in the chat. That's related to the energy transition and new development, new technologies, etc. Where, as Eugenio said, if not addressed properly, fire hazards may become a major obstacle to the deployment of solutions and technologies incentivized by the EU policies on energy efficiency and renewable. So PV panels, electric vehicles, heat pumps have been mentioned. There could be other things. So maybe first, Christoph, that's an important challenge for the fire safety community, isn't it?
Oh, yes, of course, indeed. It is a very big challenge to fire safety community, and that's why it was even identified as one out of 6 biggest challenges and problems for the fire safety in the EU, in the European Fire Safety Action Plan. And because of the energy transition, as we know, buildings are getting not only more energy efficient, but also more complex. And these changes result with higher fire hazard and less predictable fire environment. And we also need to remember that fire safety of building is a complex challenge itself, and the energy transition makes this challenge even bigger. And in my opinion, this is very important to be aware that there is a real risk that an energy renovated building will become more dangerous for people than before renovation. And such situation would undermine the whole sense of renovation, of course. And this year, is, if I remember properly, in June, I was taking part in a very good discussion on fire safety of buildings in the light of the energy transition, which was participated by firefighters, fire safety engineers, fire safety researchers from many countries. And what worried me and also some of my colleagues was that together we were not able to answer to a few quite, in my opinion, basic questions concerning the fire safety of in that terms it was about the electric vehicles and energy storage systems. For example, there was a question how to deal with the fire of 5 or more burning batteries in electric cars parked in an underground garage. And the only idea we found together was to deploy unmanned fire vehicle. And of course, it's not a very typical equipment for each fire station. And we should realize that this hypothetical, in fact, scenario will get highly probable quite soon. Or another question which was raised and we were not able to respond to, what knowledge gaps are in place for lithium-ion batteries in the built environment? Because in fact, there are too few researches on that. And try to imagine the firefighter situation. This, the theoretical knowledge was not developed yet, but firefighters have to face with these new fire challenges in practice now. They are not, they can't say that we will wait till the knowledge will be developed. What means that very often they have to compromise their own safety.
Thank you, Christophe. So, Antonio, you are not an expert in fire safety, but if no, Christophe, so the whole fire safety community, so from the fire services, but also academics I've seen in the chat says, okay, we have big challenges there. We don't really know how to best ensure fire safety in that evolving environment. We don't really know how to best tackle the fires when they happen, and yeah, we need to do something. And then we say, actually, for this, we need to do some research, to have some data, and to find what are the best solutions, to have guidelines we need to exchange. So we better do it at EU level than leaving the 27 member states doing it on their own with their little resources. So that's the argument. Would it, for you, Antonio, justify some action at EU level?
Yes, it would. But I wanted to say something about energy transition. Because there we can find, I think, another ground for a European Union intervention. This is very much connected, by the way, to what Christophe said, rounds up my point. This is very much connected to the internal market. And in fact, Article 114 on the internal market even cites Article 194 on energy transition. So I think that you could use both articles in order to ground European Union legislative or regulatory measures in this field. Energy transition is very important because, as was said before, this renovation of buildings that should take place in order to implement the Green Deal agenda might create more hazards in terms of fire safety than before. And that is an important argument. If you could show that, that is an important argument. So here you have another ground, another basis where to ground European Union intervention on the basis of the subsidiarity, a subsidiarity kind of reflection. To answer your direct question, I think, as Teresa was saying before, that would be a European Union-wide concern, to set up kind of platform where more data and better data on fire safety could be gathered, offered, and analyzed would be an important ground for European Union intervention. Because I'm not the expert on the field here. You are the experts, but as I understand, you are saying that there is a need for this data on a European and international basis. I think that is important because we're not talking about any legislative intervention whatsoever here. Would be a different kind of intervention, and if you could connect that with energy transition and internal market, that would be interesting.
Thank you, Antonio. Eugenio, Christophe, Teresa, would you like to add anything on this or the type of actions that are necessary? I think we discussed it already extensively, but if you have something to add.
Just to say, Quentin, it doesn't make any sense to me about undertaking the renovation wave without thinking about fire safety at the same time. So energy performance certificates will tell me about insulation, ventilation, heating systems, but not about the efficacy of electrical installations. If we're going to have major renovation, and we need it in terms of energy efficiency, I am a big fan. We also have to include fire safety.
Yeah, thank you, Teresa. But as we see often now, the argument of subsidiarity is used against this, but we need to challenge it. So there are a lot of other elements that have been mentioned by Eugenio, but I think we have had good discussions already around this too. I would like to move towards a conclusion. So we in this debate and what Teresa just mentioned.
Can I just give an example? I think it would be useful for you guys.
Yeah.
On the subsidiarity, I just was searching while other people were talking. Subsidiarity and proportionality justification for a council recommendation on lifelong learning.
Oh.
Can I say that?
Yes.
As an example, it's a way of example. Okay, so what the council says here in order to justify this recommendation, which is soft law, is in paragraph number 20, and it says this recommendation fully respects the principles of subsidiarity and proportionality. Full stop. If we take a look instead to this is what I was saying. So if we take a look, for example, at the European Commission's proposal for a regulation on artificial intelligence, it deals with subsidiarity in a couple of paragraphs. Okay. In the preamble of the proposed regulation. This illustrates very well that one thing is to propose a European Union's harmonization measure, and another thing would be to propose recommendations, complementary, supplementary measures, etc., etc. Sorry, I stop here.
Yeah, thank you, Antonio. So to move on, so I think it's very illustrative, but now to move on, often what we hear on fire safety is, fire safety is national competence according to subsidiarity principle, and it's used as a break, as you mentioned before, not to do it. So if we want to move the analysis and discussion, we need to bring some nuance into this. And as highlighted by Eugenio, at the end, the building codes, they are national competence, and they integrate fire safety, but there are many elements that are necessary to ensure fire safety. So the elements that are necessary to ensure fire safety, that can be addressed or should better be addressed at EU level. So like data, statistics, research, testing methods, standards, impact of EU policies such as energy transition related, impact of common challenges, consumer information, education. So there are many things around that could be addressed at EU level, and as Teresa mentioned, via some platforms to exchange information, to assess regulation, to decide on action. So that it's what I perceive from the conversation as being the direction we should go. Any particular views on this?
Agree.
Great, we have an agreement. So if we agree this, then I see still two challenges for us. The first one is it actually relates with many actions of the EU, many DGs involved, the Director General. And that's where it's always also a bit difficult, because you need many services of the Commission to be involved, and all of them, they say, yeah, but actually it's not exactly my area, so they will not take it into their topic. So question that I have is, how can we overcome that issue of something that is a bit too diffuse between different services of the Commission? Antonio, do you have particular experience with this, or think about other topics that could help us in this?
If the question is where to go, what door knock in order to put forward European Union intervention in this field, consequentially with what I said, I would knock on the door of the internal market DG. So your guy would be Thierry Breton. Okay, I think this is the most efficient thing that you could do, because I think this is a matter for internal market regulation, clearly. I mean, above all, if you could show with evidence, with data, that this is an obstacle, this is becoming, above all, taking into account the prospect of the Green Deal, that this is or can become an important obstacle to the free circulation of products and services, that's a matter for concern of the internal market DG. Besides probably the DG's concern with climate change and energy matters, but I would really focus my efforts in that particular DG, internal market.
And that's actually with DG Grow, where we have already around the construction product regulation, at least we have some action. But just looking at the construction product, while here what we would need is a bit broader than that, and it should relate with work of DG Energy on the energy transition, renovation wave, etc. So we still need to have a lot of coordination between DGs. Teresa, Christophe, Eugenio, do you have additional views to share on this?
Don't forget the Parliament. So to convince and get an action from the Commission, we need the Parliament, and we have got some wonderful champions in terms of fire safety. And also we need to make sure that fire safety is actually part of the manifestos for the European elections next year, and we need stakeholders to work with us. I know there are several on this call to make that happen. This isn't one organisation, this is stakeholders working collaboratively.
Thank you, Teresa. So indeed, we need to bring everyone on board of this message. We can count on the Parliament for sure. Who else do we need to convince? Eugenio, Christophe?
So I'm not pretty sure, I'm not 100% sure, but I can say that there is a small light at the end of the tunnel, and hopefully it's not the train. Because recently, together with many others, or with several organizations dealing with improvement of fire safety in Europe, we called the European Commission by sending the joint letter to Vice President responsible for the Green Deal to introduce structural coordination of all policy initiatives impacting or related to fire safety of European buildings in this particular case across different directorate generals. And initial response we received was quite promising. Of course, European Commission is thinking about that, but the answer was, let's say, more positive than negative.
On my side, what I can add is the fact that I think we need support of all the institutions. I think where we stand today is with the Commission. I think we can count already on DG Move with the fire information exchange platform, but it should be strengthened to coordinate better with the other DGs and make sure that there is a focus from the Commission as an institution on fire safety. On the Parliament, we need, of course, to convince more. I think there will be also need from the sector in this sense in the near future. And we need to convince the new Parliament that this is the right way to go. I think the real challenge that we have lies with the member states. But I think here we really need to show what is the added value for them, to have more discussion, more guidelines, more the added value that they will get with the union acting on this. And this is our role. And of course, we need to have a strong message on this and show how they will benefit from this change in the process.
Thank you, Eugenio. Yeah, indeed. Let's also keep bring member states on board. Antonio, I know you have to leave in 2 minutes, so I would like to give you the floor for short conclusion or last message.
As Eugenio was saying, do not forget the member states, because at the end of the day, the subsidiarity debate comes to a question of majorities at the council level, basically. Let's do not forget about that. I mean, the substantive argument can be very good, but if you do not have that majority at the council level, it won't fly. And the other way around. My favorite example here is the so-called birds directive. You might know about this example, but this is a beautiful example. When the European Union had at the time, European Economic Community did not have competences whatsoever in the field of the environment and animal protection. The member states, the European Commission, proposed the so-called Birds Protection Directive, and it flew. Why? Because there was unanimity at the council level. And we are talking about 79, not 89, not 99, 79, no competences at all at according to the treaties. And they grounded that directive on birds protection on the basis of the internal market articles of the treaty. Okay, so I think this is an important message. Of course, you have to, I know it's a lot of effort because you have to do it at the European level and at the member states level, but don't forget the member states, because the member states are, at the end of the day, key here.
Thank you, Antonio. So I take it as your conclusion, and then I will continue with the others for just a short statement of conclusion about fire safety and subsidiarity, what role for the EU. So maybe Teresa first.
We did some research this year, Quentin, on the link between fire safety and energy poverty. And when we actually circulate the recording of this, if we could have a link to it, I think that would be really useful. Right. Our poorest live in the leakiest and least fire safe housing. Keep Europe fire safe.
Thank you, Teresa. Christophe, your final word.
So I think that the European Union should develop and coordinate solutions which next will be implemented by member states with the support of the European Union when necessary, or to make it easier. We need European solutions, although we don't need single European legislation to implement them always.
Thank you, Christophe. Eugenio?
On my side, I think, to be honest, that there is, going back to what Antonio was explaining, there is the necessity and there is an added value to have a coordination role for the European Union to support and give some help to member states in a challenge that is common. Fires are the same, buildings are the same, but fires are the same. And I think there everyone will benefit, from the citizens to the institutions to the member states. Everyone will get something positive out of it, and we need to make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Eugenio, and thank you, everyone, particularly Antonio. It was very insightful and helpful to have your input. I think it will help all of us also during this EU Fire Safety Week that is ongoing now, with different events continuing tomorrow, after tomorrow, where we will also engage with members of the European Parliament, the Commission, particularly on Wednesday in the Parliament, to bring that up. And different partners involved in this discussion or in the audience today are also preparing a fire safety manifesto that will clearly call for action for the next Commission, the next Parliament. And all this background on subsidiarity will be very helpful for this. So let's move things forward. We should not see subsidiarity as just a break to action. We just need to position correctly the argumentation and the proposal. I think that's the key point. So thank you, everyone, for your participation today, all the panelists and also the audience. for your interaction in the chat and Q&A that I could use during the discussion, and see you hopefully very soon during the EU Fire Safety Week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Quentin.
Bye-bye. Pleasure.